we are focusing on the forest area, and I'm going to be talking about the big picture outlook that we have in coming up with this design, and we really pulled our diverse knowledge and experiences in order to come up with this. So our vision for this really was to embody what the Waldorf School of Atlanta, its mission is. So focusing on the heart, mind, and hand. So how we interpreted that was reflection, interaction, and learning. And in our design, we sought to incorporate those things into different learning spaces that we have made to be multifunctional and considerate of children and different stakeholders, their different ages and developmental stages, and the different activities that would appeal to these various ranges. So if you think about the forest space, we have all been there, and it's a really great forested area in an urban neighborhood. So at this moment, it is a little bit segregated from the rest of the school just because it is like Zone 5, it's at the end of the property, but it has a lot of potential and we want to explore that. So if you think about what that space looks like, I think we've all been there. It starts in this area with this trail, and we really wanted to make it a meditative trail so that all kinds of children and teachers and students and community members could have the opportunity to go back there and really interact with the natural space. Through that area, we have incorporated different learning spaces for different types of activities that could be incorporated with the curriculum and the type of activities that students at the school do. So I'm just going to go through it quickly because my other team members are going to have more details. But at the beginning, we have an amphitheater, an outdoor amphitheater. There's bat houses and owl houses and bird houses at the canopy area here. Walking back towards the back, there's a labyrinth and a medicinal garden. It's sort of, we wanted to create, well, a lot of natural space, but also like a sense of mystery and, yeah, for smaller kids, like someone I think in the previous group mentioned a scavenger hunt, and that kind of thing could be really ideal for the space. There's also mushroom logs and gates that will indicate this area better, and also opportunities to have signages and different guided meditation, perhaps, which could be created by the students in woodshop. Same for the bat houses, and there's really different types of opportunities, like I said. For example, for those houses, there could be students who are older could be documenting this wildlife that is there, or building or painting those houses, and those children also could observe this wildlife at a different level. Yes, so I think I covered everything.
Thank you, Melanie. I just want to add a little bit more about, in general, what we, our goal and our vision of the space is going to be for the whole school and for especially our forest site. Right here, we have more thorough writing, but to sum up with one word, maybe a few words, is that we're going to create an engaging place. We believe that Waldorf School principle in teaching and learning actually encourage this interaction between nature and human beings and between human beings, teacher and students and parents. So that is the big picture vision. And to explain a little bit more, this kind of space is engaging natural environments, engaging learning space, meditating space, and community garden. So that's the big picture, and we have the principle of permaculture diagram here. We constantly want to involve permaculture principle, as you can hear throughout our presentation. Next, I'm going to talk quickly, give a quick overview of the site and our master plan, the scheme, the principle, and or the strategy of the master planning. I think most of us here are familiar with the site, so I'm not going to go to too much detail. But as you can see, the shape of the site is very elongated, and with only the narrow side facing the public road, and all the other three sides basically surrounded with neighboring properties. So this kind of situation creates a certain pattern of use, mainly more exposed at one end and very remote and not so used area at the south end. In terms of topography, the landform, the highest point of the site is actually right next to the road, and after a relatively flat front yard, you basically have a 10 to 15% slope going down to the middle of the site, and from that point on, it has a more gradual slope uphill. So the water, as you can imagine, going down, as all we had talked about, has runoff issues at the playground, at the steep area, and then accumulate at a certain flat area at the glade. Now, the activities of the school is actually happens between the church, between and around the church and these two school buildings. The traffic, the automobile access is quite well managed, as it's shown the circulation pattern by these dashed line. If we go down to the south side, we will experience, like singing birds, breeze on the trees. It's actually making this whole environment. If you really close your eyes, you'll feel that it's a deep forest. So I think that's a quite different, a contrast between quote north and south in a way. So our grand strategy is, how do we make these two area closer in usage and in exposure? So we basically, there are other issues that prompt us to suggest that we want to use this area as like the gateway, the front face of the school. So you basically want to dress up this front garden, maybe with some extra signage, gateways, and maybe even a gazebo for students to gather around, because that's the most busy area. And over this slope, has a runoff issues, and what issues we suggested or recommend water or runoff intervention mechanism. For instance, like we talk about the swales and other water collection, and utilize that water if we still have the garden here. Utilize the garden, use the water as a renewable source for the garden and for other area if we can. And then in between, we want to use. I think we really think a better signage system, wayfinding system, can help bringing people coming and in between this whole space, no matter it's the student as a learning process, or for any neighbors that will come and want to enjoy the space. These photos on the side shows some current conditions, especially towards the south end, because we want to focus on that area. From this picture, you can tell that the entrance of this picture is taken from here towards the entrance of the forest. And as you can see, this entrance is somewhat understated, and we want to suggest some ways to make it more significant, more momentous. And the other picture shows that there are neighbors who actually having a gate opening towards the forest area, and with some tracks very clearly established. And from that kind of sign, we can see that the neighbor really, whether it's invited or not, actually are using in some way using this back forest area. And we want to suggest that this is a sign for the school to involve the neighbors, to invite the neighbors to participate in the future development if possible. And because in a way they are still, I believe, a stakeholder of this development, and especially for this backyard. So that's about the site. Thank you. Okay, so then we're going to go in a little bit more about what's happening. And this is just a broad picture of what we are suggesting, and our other team member will talk about the details. So this is the blow-up area, blow-up drawings or plan for that forest area. This is the glade, and as we mentioned before, this entrance is a little bit more understated, and we want to put in some gateway, sort of monumental structure to emphasize the difference and sort of become more inviting for people to use the back trail. From that point, we are thinking, there is a need to control these two places, the north property and the south being a garden. So we want to create a fence that is not entirely like securing the place, but still give you a sense of place. So we are thinking about using a mushroom pile as fence, and extending part of it with hedges. One of the large elements about this site is the school intended or desired to have a 15-foot buffer zone along the property. We don't know exactly what that is stemmed from, but apparently there is agreement between the neighboring neighbors that the school activities should be more enclosed and separate from the neighbors, and visually, maybe even sound-wise. But in any case, that's one of our charge to create in terms of items, design items. And then I think we mentioned earlier that we're going to have some activities at the beginning of the gate after you come in from the glade. The main reason is that we think, even though we believe that there is serenity, this calming quality of the forest, this area could still be serving a somewhat like an extension for the glade when there's events or using as a sort of a small gateway, small classroom to introduce what's happening in this backyard. So we want to create an amphitheater, and for that space and for the whole potential function behind, we want to have a gateway that is more welcoming. So we are introducing tree lines that make the space more, in a way, ceremonial, I guess. And at the end of this loop back of trails, there is a opening of trees, clearing of trees, and then and think that the turning of the trail make this points very unique. So we suggest that we're going to have some sort of a stopping point for people to enjoy, for the students especially, to enjoy the place and also learning. So we are doing, we are basically get inspiration from the tradition of the school, which is using Labyrinth as a learning tool. So we're introducing a Labyrinth here. And then because we still want to take advantage of the south side, which has more sun and clearing, we are using plants and gardens to surround, to sort of circling the labyrinth so that it make it more secure and in a sense more like a place. And putting new trees to mark the entrance of the labyrinth. So this is the basic idea of what's going on with our folks area. All right.
Kind of keep that well. You want to get us up for a second? We've got
Sure.
a spiral guard on it.
Okay,
So,
I can take that, that's fine.
yeah, what we were trying to do is try to incorporate as many of the principles into each thing that we're doing. So as many different parts to kind of bring it in, like the fence, we were gonna use, make it kind of a living fence to where you'll have mushrooms growing. You could use that and compost it later on for the garden or any other part. You know, you'll have plenty of parts of growing area, and I'm sure everybody's section will, and that'll help to be distributed throughout the property to kind of help grow whatever's growing in those areas. But on this side right here, just as you pass through, we were thinking of a spiral garden. And in that, we're gonna use some plants that, you know, like wild strawberries. So I kind of picture the kids coming through and grabbing some strawberries after, you know, they're about to go through the trail. Some bergamot bee, some anise hyssop, wild ginger, and yeah, maybe some other plants that'll kind of get smells. So when you come through, you'll be able to interact automatically as soon as you go through. I'll go ahead and move this one now. Here's a little bit more of the mushroom fence. There's a couple different ways to do it, but we're kind of thinking this way more. This way it's easier if you have kind of a lean-to where it's going to be easy to take off and put back, so you're not having to stack and restack, but you know, who knows, that might be possible too. This is a little bit more detail of what it might look like. We were trying to use, just like it has in different parts of the property, you know, the Waldorf symbol, so it's a little bit more inviting. Right here, we were thinking, because everything's kind of running down, and we'll get to a little bit more into that, it's such a high area of traffic that have a little bridge to kind of keep it off to allow that undergrowth to start to take over to help block some of that water rushing down into the glade.
In case, here is a sort of imaginary rendering of what's going on after you come in. If you look at this point, looking at the gate, here's the gate structure, and that is the rock climbing wall, existing one. And then we're gonna put lines of trees separating the amphitheater with the trail, and then having this little spiral planter at the beginning to mark the entrance.
Okay, here's a little bit more of the amphitheater, and this will show right here a little bit more of the hugel beds and the swales that we'll be putting in. You know, all the water seems to come down from the top. You know, everything runs down from every direction. So everybody seems to be doing their part to kind of control that. So if we could do our part to kind of slow it down, then maybe that'll help everything from getting so washed out down at the bottom. Right here, we were thinking about hugel beds though, because we could use that along with the spiral garden to put a little bit of planting in there. I found some really good lupine floral breeds that you could seed, and there's 5 or 6 different kinds that will come up. Some are annual, some are perennial, and they'll put out some beautiful flowers. So when you come through, you'll have some of the plants here where you'll smell and you can taste, and then you'll have the hugel beds that will be covered with the different flowers that'll attract the bees and all the different animals in the area. And of course, the amphitheater. during the winter time, we were walking around and I saw one of the trees, it had a lion's mane mushroom growing on it. Right now, I just went back out there, you didn't see it, but it kind of makes me nervous because I was looking into it, and they were saying that it's possible that that could kill the tree because it'll start taking over and spreading throughout. So because of that, I thought that might be perfect if we could compass it, or if it has to be taken out, you hate to do it, but we could use that wood to build the amphitheater. And this would be a perfect example of how to do it. You wouldn't really need nails or anything like that. You could split the wood, and I've seen them do it where they have pretty much a hammer, and they'll just kind of hammer it down until it splits, and then you could do the different sides. Of course, these you could put up and just chainsaw them to kind of set it up. Yeah, but
We actually offer 3 options, possibly, and considering the cost and considering the look and possibility of how to achieve it. One way of doing it, I'm not sure you guys can see it on this angle, but it's more like a bench. And these 2 are more like a bench, but right here is probably the most premise, the word.
yeah.
To do it, basically just the felled tree trunk and roll it in place. Of course, you have to clean it and make sure that it's not going to be with bugs and whatnot, but it's sittable. So that's the simplest way to do it, but this area actually has that slope to create that kind of space.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful view of watching the glade, because you're right there. You have a perfect view to kind of see everything that's going on, and it blends in with the background. But I'll pass it off to Amanda for the. You need the other one here? Oh. I can see this one.
Okay, so first of all, I'm sure you're wanting to know how we're planning on putting all of these plants into the forest area. I ended up looking into 2 options for this. The first is the goats. DeKalb County has an ordinance that says if you have livestock, you have to have a living shelter for them more than 200 feet from a property line. This is 200 feet. So technically,
From where to where?
this is 200 feet.
Oh my.
So it's so narrow that you can't have it 200 feet from all the neighbors. So theoretically, you should not be able to use the livestock. However, if you got the agreement of your neighbors and the rental company did not mind that you weren't meeting code, since it's temporary and it's not permanent, you're not putting the animals there forever, then it's possible that you would just be totally fine with doing that. The quote I got was that's in the estimate is 4 per acre, but the guy said that this area would probably be cheaper based on the pictures if it was done by the daily rate. But he couldn't give me that unless he came out to the site first. So the quote that's in there is probably a little bit high. So using the goats, that would be the easiest option labor-wise. But it's probably more expensive than just having a work day, volunteer day, and having people come out and do it. Regardless, I would recommend that somebody come out and identify and pull all of the poison ivy as soon as possible, just to go ahead and get that pulled up. At that point, once you got that pulled up, the goat guy said that he would recommend the goats coming out there twice in succession. Have them come out once, clear the land, wait, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks, and then have them come back out again, because he said at that point the roots underground would start to die back between the first cutting and the second cutting. And so then when you have the goats come back in the second time to mow it down again, it should really help with killing by the root system, through the root system. So also, this is probably the only waste that's going to be on the property, because all of it needs to, unless you decide to burn the English ivy, because I would not burn the poison ivy. all of this needs to be transported off the site or burned, because otherwise apparently a whisper of English ivy will take back over. So it all needs to be taken off and disposed of. But that is like the only waste product, you know, it's a one-time thing from the site. And it's not an issue if you do use goats for the site instead of having to pull it. So then the next step that I was working on is the buffer zone. Per the agreement with the neighbors, the Waldorf school has agreed to put up a fence, which is going to be a chain link fence, and they've agreed to have a 15-foot buffer zone from the fence into the forest. Originally we had 3 layers, and then we started looking at the spread of some of these trees, and the trees themselves are going to be over 10 feet eventually on their own. So we took out the 3rd layer because we didn't want to lose, especially on this eastern side here, the buffer zone is already pushing into close to the trail. So we didn't want to lose any more of this area here than we had to. So we took the buffer zone down to 2 layers, and they're going to alternate. If you can see the colors here, we've got yellow and a peach color and a yellow and the peach color. So you can have an American holly as one of your background trees, and an eastern red cedar as the other. And then for your 2nd layer, I chose the maple leaf viburnum and the gallberry. All of these trees are native, and shrubs are native, and they're also excellent for shelter for birds and wildlife. Gallberry honey is actually supposed to be a big thing, although I've never had it. So apparently it might be an acquired taste. I'm not sure. Somebody had it. So, and then the maple leaf viburnum, also again, good food source. It also has a very good, this is the fall color, so it will be a good backdrop against the dark green of these trees in the fall. So you'd have all season color and interest and everything going on in your buffer zone, not just like a plain green, you know, backdrop for you to look at. So then, all right, we're going to move into, no, we're going to move into the trail itself. We have 2 intentions for this trail. One is for it to be educational, and the other is for it to be more of a meditative space. So when I was researching the meditation trail and how to implement that, or things that you didn't want to do, I found this closing prayer of the Navajo. It's part of the Blessing Way ceremony. And so part of that prayer says, "With beauty before me may I walk, with beauty behind me may I walk, with beauty above me may I walk, with beauty all around me may I walk." And so I kind of took that as the theme. That's what we're looking for a meditative walking space. You want that beauty to surround you. You want to see it everywhere you look, all seasons, you know, regardless of the time of year. This is what it looks like now. This is in the fall. This was a picture out of the, this is what we're going for. We already have the canopy trees. We're going to be putting in more understory trees, the eastern redbud. I have a thing for the farkleberry just because I like the name. And I'm sure the kids will, because my kids do. And then these are the 2 of the trees that are going to go back in the Labyrinth area back there. As an education trail, we were thinking that we would put up, when these new trees are installed and the new plants, whatever class, I think it's the 5th grade up, does woodworking classes, we were thinking that they would be making the signs for the trails, for the identification signs. Also plan on that class doing the owl design and the bat house design. I'm only using one of each. The bat house design can be elongated so that it can hold more bats, but because of the territorialness of the owl and how close they can and can't be to people when they're nesting, this is probably the only species, the screech owl, the eastern screech owl, that will work in this urban setting for that. So I'm only putting one house in on this plan for that because of the territorialness, and you want it to be used, not crowded out. I did not add any other birdhouses, only because we're adding so many trees that can be used as shelter, and there already are lots of trees and shelter and everything back there, so we don't need to add any more for that. And then for using it as a meditation trail, again, you know, referencing the out-breath, for Waldorf School, the playground's, very active, lots of movement and stuff going on there. We want this to be more intentional. So the meditation trail, there's four meditation postures: sitting, walking, lying down, and standing. The walking can be particularly helpful after a meal or during times of strong emotion or stress, and it has the same benefits as sitting meditation. So it reduces stress, strengthens the immune system, conflict resolution, improves focus and memory. So I think this would be a great alternative. You can use it as a nature trail depending on the intent of the teacher as you come out there. It can be either a meditation trail or an educational trail. The labyrinth at the end, I had originally planned on wanting to put a spiral walk there because I saw on your website that apparently there's a spiral walk that happens during the advent season or something. So knowing that you already did that for the younger grades, I decided that it would be nice to offer something to the older children and the older grades that sort of had the same result, but not quite. The labyrinth is much different from the spiral walk because you have the twists and the turns. It goes back and forth and back and forth. There's one path in, there's one path out. There's no wrong way to do it. Because of the twists and turns, it tends to balance the brain. So if you've been doing too much, head work, then you can use this as a transition piece to moving into heart work. So it balances out both sides of the brain. And again, it also offers all of the same benefits as meditation. And I found a booklet that I had printed. So you have the owl nest box plans and the bat house plans. But there's a booklet that is called Kids on the Path that is a school labyrinth guide. So it's for how to introduce the idea of using a labyrinth and how to build it. And so I don't have a line for the labyrinth in the estimate because one of the ideas was to have all of the students be part of building it and having them all bring 2 to 3 rocks apiece, and then having a school day where you lay it out and you use everybody's rocks so they're all a part of building that labyrinth. And now I'm going to let Myra talk about plants.
Now I am going to talk about positive sectors. We spent a lot of time talking about what we want to keep out. We want to take out all the invasives. We want to build this huge barrier to block out the views. But then we really hadn't talked much about what would we like to bring in. And the thing that really struck us was wildlife, especially birds. And we've already introduced holly trees in the barriers. And one thing about holly trees is they bear a lot of fruit in January. So you'll get in December, January timeframes, you'll get clouds of birds coming in the wintertime. It's just amazing to see. We added 2 birdhouses, as she's already discussed. We thought that owls and bats would be especially fascinating to children, right? Because they're cool. They're not like little Tweety birds or like big, raptor birds. And then bats. Bats are awesome. And they're also multifunctional because when you have owls, they will, get rid of, if you have any rat problems, they'll help take care of your rat problems. And the bats will take care of mosquitoes, especially if you have a lot of swampy areas, which we do around here. You would think mosquitoes might be a problem, so bats would be great for that. The bats, we located them here, I think like just off to the side here, because they need kind of a sunny area for their house. So we have this little spiral walkway. We place it in about the only kind of sunny spot that we have in this area. So we like to take advantage of this to also add, we call it a bat garden, but we're also trying to make it multifunctional because we want to draw bats in and get them to use the house. And in order to do that, you need plants that will flower at night and get insects coming in at night. So most of these plants are ones that are specifically recommended for attracting bats. And we also chose ones that would have medicinal and herbal uses, like and edible uses. So we've got edible elderberry, which is an edible berry, and it's also a great medicine for colds. Boneset's also a cold medicine. Touch Me Not is great for rashes. So if we still had poison ivy, you just run over to the garden and grab some Touch Me Not. Mountain mint is like a common woodland mint. It's the most common one you'll find in the mountains here, which is an edible, and obviously you can make tea too. Jerusalem artichoke is like, it has a big root that's kind of like a potato. So if you wanted to, instead of stockpiling rice and beans in your closet, like a prepper, you can just plant a huge patch of this in your backyard, and then if you run out of food, you just go back with a shovel and dig up a bucket full. Around our little garden, we were going to add a trellis of muscadines, which is a great wild fruit that grows here in Georgia. I guess the students probably won't make wine, but if that was allowed, they could. We're taking advantage of the sunny spot to add some fruit trees. We've got 2 wild black cherries, which are a common wild fruit in Georgia, and persimmons, which are also very common in Georgia, and they produce like a pretty large fruit, and it's really sweet, and it produces a lot of fruit. So those were some good choices there. So that's what we can fit into this little area. I would like to point out that we actually have a lot of empty wooden space that we didn't even use at all. So it would be a great opportunity to introduce big nut trees, like walnuts and chestnut oaks. I mean, you could just get a big bucket of walnuts and go down to the forest and just have the kids throw them. And I mean, I'm sure they'd come up all over the place. So also the ground cover, since we're replacing the ground cover, partridge berry is a wild edible berry that would cover the ground. Wild ginger is also an edible. Solomon sills, another edible ground cover. So you could basically cover the whole 3 acres, and you could bring in, what the children could never eat it all. So whatever they didn't eat, the animals would come in, and you could just get all kinds of wildlife in here. So.
Okay, and I'm going to wrap up by addressing our estimate and the phasing of the space. I know some of this, so probably the biggest priority is the buffer area and the fence. I did not put the fence on the estimate because at the time I didn't know what it was, but also because I know the school has already agreed to put that in now that the property line has been clearly delineated, I think. So that the fence will go in first, although I don't have that on the estimate. So then the next thing that we would do is work on pulling the poison ivy, or having the goats come in, or doing a volunteer work day to pull the English ivy if that can't happen. The other priority is to put in the swales here as soon as possible to help control the water flow into the glade. So the fencing, the swales, and clearing the property are the first 3 priorities. Planting the buffer zone, that's going to be a lot of plants, and it's going to take, unless you want to do it all at once and you can afford to do that, I have that on here as an ongoing process. So like start, in one corner and then kind of work your way out as that happens. So also because of the tree that Victor saw with the lion's mane on it, I think that at that point it would be a good idea to have, after you get the land cleared, to have an extension agent or an arborist to come out and look at the trees, make sure, are there any that are dead, dying, diseased that need to come out? So at that point, that would become an item that you would need to take care of. Decatur does have a tree ordinance in place, so those canopy trees are allowed to come down if it's signed off on by a certified arborist that they are dead, diseased, or dying. And then that arborist can also, because there's a lot of saplings scattered throughout, the arborist can say,
10 minutes.
how many need to stay. The Forestry Service was not very helpful with that, other than to say that this was a climax forest and we should leave it alone. But the arborist can come out and say how many saplings can come out, how many need to be left to replace the canopy trees that will eventually come down. And that will open up, with those removed, that will open up spaces to put the understory trees that we have picked and install the garden areas here by removing some of those saplings that are in the way now. And then obviously the biggest expense is possibly the amphitheater. Other than the plantings, the actual structures themselves, those can happen as time allows. In our budget that we did for the space, the budget reflects what it would cost if you did not do the work. And then we have a column over here with ideas and alternatives. So we have a column that says this is what it costs for materials and labor. Well, except that you can use that down tree to build your benches, so now you don't need the trees for here. And you can have a work day for the school, so you don't need to pay for this labor. So these ideas are over here. The number is like the highest number that would reflect. So like for example, some of the alternatives we have, obviously with the planning labor, if you want the students to do the planning, or if you want a teacher work day or parent work day or whatever to do the planning, you wouldn't have to pay for the planning labor. The mulch, Victor found someone that delivers free mulch, is that right? So that's something else that you're not going to need to pay for. Installing the hugel beds and the swales, that can be another volunteer work day maybe for the community, maybe to coach it as learn permaculture principles and participate in, learning how to do a swale or something like that. And then the mushroom fence, again, the students can help with that. You could do it as a workshop again for the community, come help us do mushroom logs and then we'll use them to build a fence. The gateway structures, we did do that based on hiring a contractor. The amphitheater, again, the price is if you buy the wood and you don't have to use, or you can't and you don't use the down tree that are available. And then obviously using the woodworking class students to do things like the owl house, the bat house, the trail signs, the arch. Do we have one of those? This here, we were going to use again, echoing the logo from the Waldorf school up here. Maybe have them make that and then have like a school contest. What are you going to name the forest? Or, come up with your own name for that forest area. And then again, building the muscadine trellis, students could do that also. And I think that's all we have. Any questions?
Great.